and afternoon, Bigger Pockets community. Andrew Cushman here. Glad to be back. It is May 1st. We've all survived the month of April. Growing out my house arrest haircut. Very much looking forward to when I can get that addressed. Hope all of you are doing well. So remember, this is live. We are here to answer your questions. So please go ahead and type those into the comment section and we will get those answered. And yeah, we'll share some knowledge and hopefully have a good time. So like I said, it is May 1st. And back in March, when all of this started, we were very much concerned about, oh my gosh, what is April going to look like? Everybody's being furloughed. All the businesses are being shut down. And needless to say, most renters, especially in the C and the B space, don't have the ability to just keep paying rent without a job. And so we were a little concerned about April. Well, what you heard this morning was the giant collective sigh of relief of almost all apartment owners that April actually turned out really, really well. And we think there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is, this kind of really started in mid-March, so a lot of people were able to just go ahead and pay April. The stimulus checks hit, and a lot of those stimulus checks, especially in the C and the B space, were enough to pay a couple of months' rent. So that definitely helped in April. And then for those who truly did lose their jobs, the new unemployment benefits with an extra $600, I think a week it is, that really helped. So April actually came out really, really well. Most of our properties, actually I'd say about half of them are maybe just down 1% or 2%, which is kind of within the margin of error. And the other half are actually, April was better than March. So off to a good start. Most important though is, what does it look like going forward? We think May is probably going to see a slight decline, and then June we may see more of a decline after that. And then the question is what happens beyond that? And actually, since we're talking about this, I would love it for you guys to go ahead and post in the comment section. For those of you who do own, what did you see in April, and kind of what was your experience? And if you do, please put what market that was in and what class of property you own. And also what we noticed is it really depended on the not only the class of the property, but the location and how proactive management was, right? So, maybe a C- in a true urban area might have struggled a little bit more, whereas, kind of our C+ to B+ properties fared the best. But also properties where people were really proactive about putting out resources to residents and saying, hey, residents, here's all the resources. Here's how you get unemployment. Here's when you should get your stimulus checks. Here's companies in your market, in this market, that are hiring, and just being really proactive and showing them that, hey, we're empathetic. We understand. We are here to work with you. Rent is still due because our mortgage is still due and salaries are still due, and we've got to pay the utility bills and all that. So being really proactive seemed to differentiate which properties did well and which ones didn't do as well. So you just a second. All right. So again, please let us know you're here, and hit the like button, hit the hearts. Let us know where you're coming in from. Let me see here. So we've got not seeing the question feed for some reason here. So sorry about that, guys. Give me just a second. Okay. Hey, there we go. I got see. All right. So we have Natalie. Thank you for jumping in. Let's see. All right. In New Jersey, the governor let every tenant choose to use their security deposit to pay rent. So landlord has no deposit. If this happens in your state, what would you expect? That's a perfect example of part of why it's so hard to predict how this is going to pan out, because there's this constant wild card of what is the government going to do, what is what are our politicians going to do, what laws are going to be changed. So if I was in New Jersey and the governor let every tenant choose to use their security deposit to pay rent, the number one main thing I would do is make sure I kept really good track of who did that, right? Of what residents used their security deposit to pay rent. In fact, in some of our properties, normally that's something that we would never allow, but we actually, most of our stuff is in Georgia and Florida at this point, and we actually voluntarily did that. We didn't advertise it, but if someone came in and they had exhausted other options, we did give them the option. Say, hey, look, we can take your security deposit and we can apply it to rent, and then we will, and then you can, we will consider maybe paying it back slightly over time to rebuild that deposit, or just letting it go. Especially if they're typically a good resident that clearly just was just affected by COVID-19. So it does kind of increase, or decrease your leverage a little bit as a landlord, not having that deposit anymore. But given the circumstances, it's again, it's something that we did willingly. And depending on your tenants, you can either ask them to rebuild that over time, or just let it go and say, given the circumstances, we're all just kind of trying to figure this out. But great question. So, all right, we got lots of questions coming in, and appreciate everyone jumping in here. So we got Brandon. Let's see, Ray Houses. And also, guys, let us know where you're coming from. Again, please hit the like button. So Ray Houses asks, hey, Andrew, what's the best way to get started when you're broke but knowledgeable? I love it. The best way to get started when you're broke but knowledgeable is find someone who isn't broke, but maybe isn't knowledgeable, right? So you want to look for some partners that have the strengths or assets that you don't have. So when I got started in this, I didn't have the money to do this either. And so I went and I got a property under contract, and then went out and raised the money. It was probably the most difficult 6 months of my life, at least business wise anyway. And syndicated the deal. And that's the beauty of syndication, is you can go buy a $10 million property and not really have a whole lot of net worth yourself. So to be broke but knowledgeable is go out and find partners, again, who have maybe the finances, and where you can show them that you truly are knowledgeable. And how ways you might do that is to bring a deal and say, hey, look, I underwrote this. Here's why I think this is a great market. Here's why I think this is a great property. Here's the opportunities. I got it, at a discount this way, or, there's the three competing properties, they're doing this and this property's not. So there's an opportunity here, or we can improve management this way. Demonstrate your knowledge and ability to people who could come in as a financial partner. So that is definitely one way to do that. Let's see, we got Reese Martinez from New Orleans. Thanks for jumping in. Appreciate you being here. Let's see, Kelly from Sacramento. DJ Cray, is it better to wait for a mentor or just jump in? If you just wait for a mentor, they will probably never show up. You have to go out and find a mentor. And how you do that is, again, just connecting with as many people as you can. And it's not running, it's not going up to somebody that Let's say you want to get into multifamily, and that is your area of, that you really want to get into, and you're talking with people who are in the multifamily world. You don't just go up and say, hey, will you be my mentor, right? Because that kind of turns people off, or that's a little bit creepy. It's not like, if you see an attractive person at a restaurant and you're single, you don't run up to them and say, hey, can we get into a serious relationship, right? So mentorship is something that, you can just go out straight out and hire somebody. And I've done that personally. That is actually how I got started. It was a referral from a friend, but I did literally hire the guy. Although we became friends and we still work together this day and have partnered on 6 or 7 significantly sized deals. So you can just go out and expedite the process by straight up hiring somebody. The other thing to do is just let relationships develop naturally. Over time, if you participate in the multifamily world, and what I mean by participate is you're on Bigger Pockets, doing what you're doing right now, right? Being on the Facebook Live, so that everybody who's watching is seeing your name and they know that you are interested in multifamily. so putting your name out there, connecting with people, there's going to be people that you just naturally connect with really well that are more experienced and that are more knowledgeable. And those those people can become your mentors, right? So some of my mentors, it's not actually all of them at this point. It's not an official relationship or designation of, hey, you're my mentor. It's people that I can call whenever I need to and have a 20-minute conversation, right? So kind of look at it the whole spectrum. You can hire somebody and it's a paid thing and it's very formal, or it's just a natural relationship. But I would definitely jump in and get the mentor at the same time. You want to learn from other people's experience. The problem with your experience is you get it just after you need it. So great question. So we got a bunch more here. Sunny from Hawaii. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see, Matthew from Springfield, Massachusetts, with Class C and B, about 500 residential units. Congratulations. That's awesome. Let's see. So in April, he saw about a 5% decline in collections. That's actually, pretty good. It sounds like I talked with quite a few owners here in this past week, probably cumulative 20,000 units, and it would seem like the average is about a 3 to 7% decline. I've talked with some where their portfolio is closer to 10 to 12%, but those are kind of more your urban C properties. So Matthew, sounds like you're doing a good job. Definitely everybody shore up your finances, both personally and at the properties, as much as possible. We don't know how long this is going to last, how tough it might get. And you want to make sure that you can thrive on the backside of this when there's going to be lots of opportunities, but the only way to thrive on the end is to survive getting between now and there, right? And so that just means cutting expenses, building up reserves, and making sure that your property and your investors are as well taken care of as possible. Nowadays, asset preservation and asset management is number one, and then acquisitions is number two after that. But great job, Matthew. Let's see, we got Pierre. Do syndicates always include equity in the deal? If you're looking just to raise private capital without equity, would you go the right route of promissory notes? Both of those are great options, and we've done both, right? So it really depends on your investor pool and what they're looking for. So, for example, if your investors are primarily excited about upside in the deal and profits when you sell, and they're not so worried about cash flow now, they're hoping to get 60 or 70 or whatever percent large profit when they sell, then that means you've got a pool of investors who are primarily interested in equity, right? Now, if you've got a pool of investors who are like, you know what, I kind of just want guaranteed cash flow. I would love to just get 8% a year, no matter what, for the next 3 years, right? Well, then that means maybe you can go and syndicate the debt, right? And it still is syndicating. You're still creating a security, right? And so you still have to go the syndication route. But what that does is, if you syndicate all the equity or the non, if you're getting a bank loan or something like that, and then rather than give syndicate equity, if you syndicate it as debt, you pay all the investors, let's just say the 6 or the 8% year in, year out, and then when you refinance or sell, they get paid off as debt, and then you, as the sponsor, assuming you created value and assuming you've sold this property for more, you get to keep the bulk of that upside, right? And you might want to do things like offer your investors like a kicker, right? Like, okay, you get 8%, and then when we sell, you get an extra 2 points or 2%, or and then that's actually the term that we use as kicker. So, Pierre, that's a good question. It can be either way. It depends on your investor pool. It depends on your business model, and kind of what your goals are for the property. So thank you for Pierre for jumping in. All right, I've got quite a few more questions here. Hey, Tao Feng, good to talk to you again. I see you regularly on here. We'll have to connect outside of Facebook here sometime soon. But let's see, we have Tao says, I noticed that some syndicators have stopped distributions. Good or bad idea? What are your thoughts about it? Thanks. That's very, very relevant. I would say most syndicators, almost all syndicators, have stopped distributions, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And well, the short answer is yes, that is absolutely a good idea. And yes, it's the right idea. It's not fun. It's certainly not a message that I or any other sponsor wants to put out to their investors, but it is the right one. And here's why. One, getting back to what I said earlier, the number one thing is asset preservation right now. We all hope this isn't going to be that big of a deal, but there's a significant probability that it will be. A lot of forecasts I've seen are, when this all dust settles, we could be looking at long-term unemployment of 8, 10, 12, 15%. In the Great Recession, we only hit 8.6% unemployment, right? So we're talking higher than that. And one of the most important fundamentals for apartments is employment, right? So if we've got really high unemployment, that means all apartments are going to suffer to some degree. And the way you lose money with an apartment is if you don't have enough cash flow to pay the mortgage, and you either are forced to sell at a loss, or you have to hand the keys back to the bank, or the bank comes and takes it. That's when you lose money. That's when your investors lose money. So your number one goal right now is to make absolute certain that doesn't happen. So a big piece of that is stopping distributions so that you can build up cash reserves. The other thing is, if you get in a position where you need help from your lender, let's say you've got a Fannie Mae loan or a Freddie Mac loan, and your cash flow drops to the point where you can't make the mortgage payment. If you go to them and say, hey, I need help, can we get a forbearance or something like that? If they see that you've been making distributions, the answer is no, right? So you have to stop distributions so that if you require help from the lender, they'll be willing to give it to you. And the third thing is, keep in mind, just because you stop making distributions doesn't mean the money just evaporates or it's gone, right? So what we do is we have a distribution account. And so we're taking the money that would be going out as distributions, we're setting that aside in an account so that if this blows over and cash flows are still good and everything's okay, we can just take that money and get it all caught up at once, right? So all of our investors will get a big check, 4 quarters worth of distributions or whatever that is. That's what we're doing with the distributions. But if things do get tough, they do get difficult, that money is in the account to support the property. One thing, beauty about real estate is, in almost all cases, as long as you can hold on to the property long enough, you will come out ahead. So we want to make sure that we can do that. So again, it's difficult to stop distributions. I really do believe it is the right thing to do. And in the long run will be better for both you and for your investors. But great question. Let's see. All right, we got a handful of questions here. We have, all right, Alasha from Austin, Texas. Thanks for jumping on. Let's see. Alasha asks, I wanted to know, would this be a good time to get involved in real estate investing? Are your chances of having ROI, return on investment, lower due to the pandemic at hand? Thoughts? Well, if you were to ask the National Association of Realtors, it's always a great time to buy. But I'm not with the National Association of Realtors, so I can have a slightly different message. It is a good time to get involved in real estate investing in a number of ways. Number one, education. All right, always be educating yourself. And if you think about it, what is the most common complaint that we've all had the last 5 years? Like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to get a deal. I can't get a deal. There's so much competition. It's so tough. Prices are so high. This is just crazy. Competition is dropping. Prices are dropping. I have seen in the multifamily world, talking with brokers the last week, most contracts are currently being renegotiated to anywhere from 10 to 15% below what they started at maybe 2 months ago. So we've already seen about a 10% drop in multifamily pricing, and we can talk more about if everyone has any questions on that, what we've seen and where we think it's going, just pop that in the comment section, and we'll get to that in a minute. So we've already seen a bit of a price decline. Are your chances of having ROI lower due to the pandemic at hand? I mean, if you buy something today based off a T12 that ended in March, yeah, the odds of your returns, the odds of your returns coming out as good as that would predict are extremely low, right? We're already seeing collections start to drop a little bit in April. They're probably going to drop a little more in May. We've already seen pricing coming down. So now is the time to get involved by building your relationships with brokers, building your relationships with investors, analyzing deals so that you have a good sense of your market. And even if things are dropping, the more deals you're looking at, you'll develop a sense of, oh, hey, things seem to be bottoming out, or what, this is such a great deal that even if things drop another 10% or 20%, I still want to own this and it'll still cash flow. So yes, it's a good time to get involved, and pretty soon it's actually probably gonna be like the best time to get involved. So start now. Do those things. It doesn't mean, like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean just jump out and buy something today, but there's lots of other things you can do to get involved. So thank you, Alasha from Austin. A good question and very, very timely. So, all right, we've got quite a few other questions here. All right, what do we want to do? Let's say, all right, Anthony Fontana, working on a deal with tenants in place. Do you recommend I do the interior or exterior renovations first? Pretty much always okay, Chris, I guess it could be a little bit different with tenants in place, but the general rule is you always want to do the exterior renovations first, right? Because that's curb appeal, that's your first impression, that's going to bring in leasing traffic. And even if you've already got a tenant in place, if they leave, right, you want to bring someone in as quickly as possible and the high rent as possible. Also, one thing we learned and saw in the last recession is that while cutting expenses is critical in these times, many owners make the mistake of not spending any money, right? And they let maintenance get deferred. They let the outside of the building, the gutter falls down a little bit and they leave it hanging there. They don't cut the grasses off and they don't spend the money to put in the flowers. And the properties start to look like they have deferred maintenance. And so then that actually draws in lower quality tenants and lower rents. And so, if you've got a property or you're buying a property, first thing to do is make sure the outside looks great. And then you can do the inside. Typically, if we have tenants in place, we don't do any renovations until at least when they come up to renew their lease. And if they want to stay, then we'll might do a partial renovation, right? Because it's hard to do all new flooring and all new paint and all this other stuff when they're living in there. We might just do things that are a little bit easier to do with someone living in it, meaning we'll go in and swap out the appliances, the hardware, maybe put knobs on the cabinets and do that sort of thing. And then bump the rent maybe a slightly smaller amount. And also at this point in time, we're actually not doing any interior upgrades, right? Our focus is renewals, keeping people in place, because when you get into a recession, the standard value add model that many of us have been using the last almost 10 years now doesn't work nearly as well. But good question. So, all right, let's see what we got here. And guys, lots of people asking questions. That's awesome. Please let us know where you're coming from so we can give you a shout out and hit the like buttons and the hearts and let us know how we're doing. So, all right, let me see. How about MP Spears? Let's see. We got a question here is, when syndicating, what are your preferences between going 504, 506 BC, and your experience with the fees involved difference between the three? I actually am not super familiar with 504. I don't do a whole lot of that, but I do everything that we do is in 506. And so the difference between, for those of you who are wondering, 506B, that is when you're allowed to take sophisticated investors, which means they're knowledgeable, but they may not be accredited, right? And accredited means a single person with a net income of 200,000, a married couple income of 300,000, or a net worth of $1 million, excluding your primary residence, right? So if you're doing 506B, you can take people who are either accredited or just sophisticated, but you cannot advertise. And the SEC has very strict rules about what qualifies as advertising. It does, most people think of advertising as, oh, I'm going to put an ad in the paper or buy a Facebook ad or Google pay-per-click. No, you can't. What advertising means is you can't even on your own Facebook page, you can't say, oh, hey, I'm doing this great deal. If anyone's interested, let me know, right? You can't do that. You have to have pre-existing relationships with all those people. For us, we've always done 506B because we already our investor base has grown kind of organically just by word of mouth. So every time we've done a deal, we've had enough investors who wanted to get into it. The benefit of 506C is a couple of things. One, maybe if you're doing a deal that the raise exceeds your current investor pool, and you want to bring in new investors, but also it allows you to get your name out there, right? The fees, the attorney that we use, the fees are the same whether we're doing 506C or 506B. It's not there's not a huge difference in terms of legal work. It's more just kind of what set of rules are you following. And under 506C, you can advertise. The investors do have to be accredited. And then there's actually a burden of proof. You have to verify that they're accredited. And that's not as difficult as it sounds. There's great websites out there. I have not used them, but I've heard great things about Verify Invest. I believe it's verifyinvest.com. And I think it's $50 per investor. They take care of all of that for you. And candidly, we may switch to 506Cs in the coming years just so we feel like there's going to be a ton of opportunity coming. And we want to be able to buy a lot more in coming out of this recession than we did coming out of the last recession. So good question. Thank you very much for posting that. Let's see. We got quite a few people. This is great. Let's see. Let's see. How about, okay, that's actually not a question. We got comments going on. Let's see. All right, Toby Johnson, and let us know where you're coming in from. What are your thoughts on lease-to-own situations on multifamily properties? What would be a good way to approach that to the owner? That is, I'm a big believer in keeping things simple, right? There's, and to be fully transparent, the lease to own is something that I'm somewhat familiar with, but I have never done. We've done, we've syndicated debt, we've syndicated equity, we've done seller carries, I've done subject to. We have not done the lease to own. There's some risk with lease to own. If the lender, some lenders may have a problem with it. And then if you're doing, lease to own and you've got an option to buy, there's been situations where, the seller, the property's worth a lot more than that option. And now the seller doesn't want to sell it. And the seller's just like, well, forget it. I'd rather spend money, getting into a lawsuit with you than sell a property for $1 million less. So that's a bit of a risk. Now, if you're Toby, the question didn't specify, but if you were talking about mobile homes, then lease to own is great, right? Because as the park owner, you really don't want to be responsible for the maintenance on those things. So if you've got mobile homes and they're park owned, then yeah, that's a great thing to do, is bring somebody in, say, hey, you're gonna lease to own this, or really we're gonna sell it to you. You give us $1,000 down payment, and then you become the bank, and they own that. And then they're responsible for the maintenance, in theory. The reason I say in theory is because most cases, they're not going to do much maintenance to it. And then, at some point they move out and you end up doing the maintenance anyway. But in the meantime, it's their responsibility. So good question. All right, let me see here. Shantae, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. Let's see. Do you suggest starting out with a 2-bedroom duplex before going on to purchase a bigger apartment building? I'm from Philadelphia. Well, thank you for joining us from Philadelphia. It depends on your situation. So if starting out with a two-bedroom duplex gets you in the game, then yes, do that, right? You want to do deals that are a bit of a stretch for you, but also that you can get done. Our first property was, mostly vacant 92 unit deal with tons of deferred maintenance on the other side of the country. And while I'm glad we did that because it got us started and we learned a ton, I would not recommend anybody go that route. The 6 months of taking that down probably took 2 years off the end of my life, right? So if a 2-bedroom duplex gets you started, then yes, that's a good place to start. But if you have the knowledge and the resources to go straight to a 10, then go straight to a 10. Candidly, once you get above about a 4-plex, it's really kind of the same amount of work almost no matter what the size of the building. So if you're buying, a 10 unit or a 50 unit, you still got to do the same inspections. If you're syndicating, you still got to do all the same, paperwork and legal work. You still got to do all the same loan paperwork for your lender. So I would say go as big as you're comfortable, and make sure, especially in today's market environment, that whatever deal you're doing, you have reserves and contingency funds in case things don't go to plan, right? And so that means, personal reserves, but also if you're syndicating a deal or bringing in partners or investors, that part of your underwriting includes extra cash to just sit in the bank for, an emergency or a rainy day, right? And yes, that kind of lowers your projected returns, but that's better than running out of cash, right? Always better to get cash up front than to try to get it later. And if you don't need it, you can always just give it back, right? So the biggest thing is make sure you have good reserves and are well capitalized. And yes, Shantae, 92 units is very intimidating if you're going straight to it. And so again, I don't recommend doing that. That, like I said, that's part of why I've got all this gray that matches my shirt was that property. But the thing is if you start with a duplex and work your way up, eventually that 92 units won't be intimidating. So go ahead and get out there and keep looking and get started. So all right, thanks for the question. Let's see here. Well, they keep coming in, so let's keep going. Sean Murphy, what type of return should a deal offer for a first-time syndicator to raise equity capital? Again, part of the answer to that question is what's your investor pool? What's the profile of your investor pool, right? So, a couple of months ago, if you could offer a 6 to 8% cash on cash return each year, that was pretty good and would draw a whole lot of interest. Today, candidly, I'm not quite sure what that looks like. So if you poll investors right now, about 50% of them are going to say, yeah, I'm going to hold enough. I'm waiting to see how this works out. And then about the other 50% are going to be like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and jump in and invest. So, but most owner operators, most people who, buy apartments that I know at this point in the market are kind of on the sidelines, right? So, like us, we're still looking at deals that come to us, but we're not calling the brokers like, hey, what do you have this week or anything like that. So again, a couple months ago, it was maybe 6 to 8% cash on cash, maybe a 14 to 15% IRR. But when we started this back in the last recession, we were underwriting to 30 plus IRRs, and that's what we could get, and that's what investors expected, right? If something underwrote to a 28% IRR, we tossed it, right? Which nowadays I look back and go, oh, we should just buy everything, right? So what the number is today, I don't know. And really, so what I would recommend, Sean, that you do is you talk with your investors. And it could be, the best is, especially if we're stuck at home, you don't have a whole lot else to work on, call them one-on-one and have some good conversations, and then ask them what kind of returns they're looking for. When we onboard new investors, that's one of our questions is, what kind of returns are you hoping to achieve? So poll your investors. Best is to call them. If you can't do that, at least send out an email or say, hey, we're looking at a couple of deals. We're seeing returns in this range. And, if we got this and, is this something that you would be interested in? So good question. Thanks for posting. So let's see here. We've got Kathy Canoli. What are you doing in opportunity zones around the country? So thanks for posting your question, Kathy. And, YouTubers, you guys are kind of outperforming Facebook here as far as questions. So my Facebook friends, let's see if we can even it out a bit. I am actually not doing anything in opportunity zones. The reason being is the way that law was written is, and they've improved it and tweaked it a little bit since, but the gist of it is when you buy something in an opportunity zone, in order to qualify, you have to spend as much developing it as you paid for it, right? So we don't typically do ground up construction. So that means if I'm buying an apartment complex for 50,000 a unit, and I have to figure out a way to spend 50,000 a unit on it, right? And that's number one, I probably can't really do that. And number two, if I do, I'm not going to get the return. So we don't really do opportunity zones. And also with, we looked at a lot of those deals. And again, this is not always the case, but many of those opportunity zones are in bad areas. And no matter what it looks like on a spreadsheet, we don't want to do deals in bad areas because they never work out as well as they do on the spreadsheet. So again, we haven't done a whole lot of opportunity zones. And then with the CARES Act, I believe they tweaked the opportunity zone stuff as well. At the end of the day, you want to look for deals that are good deals no matter what, right? On their own, they're a good deal. And if you can find one of those in an opportunity zone, then that's a bonus. I would not necessarily just say, I'm only going to do deals in opportunity zones because there's the tax benefit, but then there's other problems, right? And then Emily popped up a follow-up question to yours, Kathy, about what exactly is an opportunity zone. And that was, I forget the exact time that they passed the law or the name of it now, but it was the Tax Reform Act, a couple of years ago, that basically designated certain tracts across the country where the government wants to see additional development and redevelopment. And if you invest there following their rules, you get some pretty significant and amazing tax benefits. So if you're investing in one of those zones, that's an opportunity zone. So, all right, let's see. We've got on Facebook. Thank you, Amy. Amy Arata asks, have you had better returns with on-site management maintenance or off-site property management companies? Good question. And the answer to that might vary a little bit depending on what operator you're talking to. But for us, we have had far better returns and far less headaches with on-site management and maintenance. It's you end up with people that know the residents, right? And a big part of keeping expenses down is keeping residents feeling like they're part of a community, feel like they know who they're working with. So with on-site staff, you have staff that knows the residents. You have staff that knows the property, right? If they've been working there for 5 years, they know the property. If you've got a maintenance guy that's been at that property for 10 years and he knows that place inside and out, there's huge value to that. And then also a benefit of having third party that or on-site that we've seen now is with the social distancing and shelter in place and all this stuff, we can't do as much in-person interactivity and leasing and all that. So that means our people have a little bit, I wouldn't call it free time, but they have some gaps of things that they can no longer do. And so one of the ways we've saved money is rather than letting staff go or cutting back their hours, they've said, hey, you know what? We can do it's May, it's time to do the seasonal flowers and put the pansies in and make everything look really pretty. So rather than paying the landscaper a couple of grand to do that, we can go do it ourselves because we have the time and we might as well, and we know what we want to see, so we'll do it, right? So our experience has been we've had much better returns with on-site management and maintenance, especially if it's a property over 50 or 60 units. It does get tougher once you get below that as far as the economics go. But, even candidly, even if we are looking at a smaller property, like 50 or 60 units, we try to figure out a way to do on-site and just maybe have them do more, right? So if you've got a maintenance guy for 50 units, typically 50 units wouldn't support a maintenance guy. But if that maintenance guy or gal can, do maintenance and turn units and do the landscaping, which we've seen that exact setup, that actually can be very economical and very helpful. So short answer is yes, we've seen much better returns with on-site management. So, all right, great question. We do have a few more questions coming in. We're probably going to wrap up soon. So if you've got a question you've been holding on to and you haven't posted it, please go ahead and put that in the comics in the comments, and we'll try to get those answered before we wrap up. Hit the hearts, shares. Again, let us know where you're coming from. Last time we had some people from Israel and Germany. It's really cool to see places from around the country and around the world where people are joining us from. So, all right, Kelly Andrews. At what point in analyzing a deal do you factor in capital expenditures? How do you go about estimating what they will be? Hey, Patrick. Hello from Germany. Thanks for joining. I appreciate that. All right. So at what point do we factor in capital expenditures? How do you go about estimating what it'll be? So there's two types of capital expenditures. There's one time, right? So you're buying a deal and you're like, okay, I got to go replace the roof. I got to do new appliances. I need to fix the parking lot. That's one-time capital expenditures. And so that is part of our early due diligence. I mean, when we first tour a property, is we will make a list of everything that we think either needs to be done and or we might want to do. And then we'll just kind of do our own internal estimate of what that might cost, right? Then if we get a property under contract, we as soon as it gets under contract, we are out there for our physical inspections, our physical due diligence. And part of what we do is usually on the second day, once we have a really good idea of the scope, or maybe the afternoon, the first day, we bring in our contractors, right? And I have our contractors come through and we say, hey, we want this done to the parking lot, and we want these buildings repainted, and we want this upgraded to the landscaping, and we want to add exterior lighting to all the buildings, and we want to replace the appliances. Any project that we're considering, we'll bring in contractors, usually a couple of them for each project, and have them give us bids, so that within a couple of weeks, we have actual proposals on what that is going to cost, so that by the time we get to our deposits, non-refundable, and or closing, we've already got that budget locked down. So that starts off right away. For recurring CapEx, right? And what that is that means you've owned the property for 2 years, and the refrigerator goes out, or someone moves out and they tear up the floor and you got to replace the floor, or you have to do a major plumbing redo. If you got a property built in the 70s and the water line under the parking lot springs a huge leak and you got to dig up the parking lot. Ask me how I know about that. That's recurring CapEx. Generally speaking, it depends on when you estimate that is how long are you going to keep the property and what condition is it when you get it, right? So, a lot of the rule of thumb is $300 a unit. If you're only going to own it for a couple of years and you're going to come in and do a nice renovation, that's probably fine. But I saw a study by the National Apartment Association that the true number for recurring CapEx is between $800 and $1,100 a unit, right? So basically, using that $300 as a starting point, the older a property gets, you might want to increase that $400, $500 a unit. And when I say $500 a unit, that's $500 in capital expenditures per unit per year. So if you've got, let's say you got 10 units, 500 a unit, you've got $5,000 of CapEx a year for that property. And then again, if you're not going to do any renovations up front, you might want to put a little more in for that. If you're going to come in and just completely renovate it, then you can maybe get away with 300 for a few years because everything's gonna be new, right? So good questions, and we could actually we could do a whole webinar on just how to do capital expenditures. So okay, great, we got lots of questions now. Let's see here. And I saw a few people who unfortunately scrolled by, but someone was from Italy. So Amy was from Maine. Thanks for joining us. Stephen, hello from Italia. Hope you're doing well out there. Italy is high on my list to visit. Would love to go up and see the Dolomites. We have AI from Texas. Maybe that's a robot, artificial intelligence, but regardless, glad to see you on board. All right, let's see here. How about Heather Carlsberg to wrap it up? We have, actually, she's got a couple of questions here. So how do you compensate yourself in being an active general partner, operator, syndicator of a multifamily apartment complex? And then her follow-up question was, as acquisition fee, asset management fee, or percentage of income collected, cash flow and typical percentage of cash flow, refinance, selling proceeds, exit strategy. The short version is it can be any combination of those that you choose. For us, how we structure it is we do an acquisition fee, and that's typically based on the size of the deal, and that could range from anywhere from 1% to 3% of the purchase price. And the larger the purchase price gets, typically we lower that percentage a little bit. So there's the acquisition fee. We do an asset management fee. For us, that's 1% of monthly collections. So if you collect $10,000 in a month, we get $100 fee. So 1% of gross collections. I've seen other operators have that range anywhere from between 1% and 3%. We do not take a management fee because again we use third party. Some other operators will self-manage and take 3, 4, 5. I've seen up to 6% fee. You can do renovation management fees. So let's say you do $1 million renovation and it comes in on budget. You can have in your documents that, hey, you're allowed to take a fee equal to 5% of what you spent, because it takes a lot of time and energy to manage that, right? And in many cases, if you're not taking it, you've got a third party or something that you're paying that to. There can also be refinance fees. We use a flat fee on that, where we buy a property, we improve it, and 2 years later we refinance and return some capital. It takes a ton of time and work to apply for those loans and get them done. So we typically have done like a flat fee of $15,000. I've seen other people do 1% of the loan balance. We also sometimes will do disposition fees. And again, these are fees that either we do or that I've seen. We don't necessarily do all of them. And again, it's up to you. But, if you have a successful exit, there's often what's called a disposition fee. And, that might be 0.5% or 1% of the sales price. And then as far as cash flows go, that comes down to what you agreed to with your investors in the beginning. So, our typical split has been 75% to investors, 25% to us. There's a million different ways, to arrange that. I've seen 70-30, I've seen 80-20, I've even seen 50-50. Again, for us, we've kind of found 75-25 seems to be a comfortable split that everybody's happy with. And go from there. So, there's there's a ton of ways to do that. And it comes down to what are your goals, what are your needs, and what are those of your investors. So great question. Hey, all right. I appreciate everybody jumping on. It was good talking with you guys. I will probably be back in 2 weeks again on the 15th to keep answering questions. There's lots going on out there. It's even, it's really, really interesting times. And but the good news is there's going to be a lot of opportunities. A lot of us have been really waiting for the opportunities. Everyone say, "Oh man, when the next downturn comes, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to get after it and I'm going to really take advantage of it." It is here, my friends. And so now is the time to get educated, be active in bigger pockets, build your relationships with investors, build your relationships with brokers, get everything in place so that when the opportunities really start to flow, you'll be ready to take advantage of it and set yourself up to be in a really good position down the road. So again, thank you everybody for jumping on. It's always great talking with you. Go out and get yourself educated. Have a good weekend. If you want to connect further with me, just of course I'm on Bigger Pockets, LinkedIn. You can just Google Vantage Point Acquisitions, and there's a contact us form on there. And again, appreciate everybody's contributions and look forward to talking with you again soon. Take care.